Hello, everyone. I want to talk today a little bit about security. I hear it's an interesting topic. I think I heard it no less than 27 times leading up to this presentation. So I think it's something that's on people's minds. I want to start the presentation with a quote from Donald Rumsfeld. I think it really is analogous to the way that we have to think about risks from a security context. There are known knowns. These are the things that we know. And there are known unknowns. That is, there are things we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. And these are the things that we don't know that we don't know. I had Philosophy 101. I had to think about that a few times. Really key concepts here. We really need to be thinking about these things in terms of strategies that need to address really all three of these. We don't get to just choose one. Now, how are we doing with security? Well, the reality is we're not doing all that well. We're seeing a lot more increases in breaches hitting our environments. In 2014-15, we thought we hit kind of a plateau, but 2016 proved us wrong. And what we're seeing last year was really the highest year that we saw successful breaches into our environments. But the story really only gets worse. In the first 5 months of this year, we saw a 35% increase in the number of breaches compared to the record year we had last year. So needless to say, something's got to change. But really, what's driving this? Why do we see this uptick? The reality is there's a really robust marketplace for personal identifiable information, or PII. That marketplace exists in something called the dark web, where actors can exchange data for Bitcoin currency. And in doing so, they can remain anonymous. Now, one might think, we used to measure cybercrime in terms of economics when we compared it with the drug trade, but we far surpassed that. This year, we're expected to see the damages caused by cybercrime to be in the neighborhood of $500 billion. Now, if we were measuring that in terms of GDP, it'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 or 23 in the list of nations. So we're talking about some real financial incentives for people to do some bad things. The types of attacks are evolving as well. We're seeing new types of attacks come about. Traditional attacks focused on really getting at your data. They were low, slow, methodical attacks where basically attackers patiently worked to navigate through an environment to find data. With the relative recent invention of something called ransomware, they're not really after our data anymore. They want to eliminate that stuff about going and get data, going to a marketplace, finding a buyer. That takes too long. We're just going to send some code down to your device. We're going to encrypt your data, and we're going to demand ransom from you to basically unlock your system. Now, this is actually proving to be quite effective. Just last month, we saw something called WannaCry hit our environments. And what made WannaCry so unique is that prior to that, most of the targets were enterprises and organizations that had large amounts of PI data. Financial services, the federal government, healthcare, these have been targets for a long time, so they've been well equipped. But what happened with WannaCry is that it didn't have any targets per se. It was carpet bombing. They went after everyone who maybe not would have expected this to happen. So what we saw was an attack that impacted 150 to 300,000 systems, if they actually told us that, probably much higher than that, across 150 countries worldwide. Now, just this week, if you want to talk about ransomware in terms of the kind of dollars they're pulling in, I just read 2 days ago that there was a company in South Korea that was a hosting company, paid $1 million to get their ransomware off their system. So this is real. What's driving this? Why is this becoming such of an issue? Well, it's kind of the opposite of kind of the innovation going on and the digitization that's going on in our world. With digitization, what's happening is we're seeing our landscape grow. And from a place where we had just a data center and potentially a few company-owned PCs that we had to manage, I'm not saying that was simple, but life was very much a box. But we introduced something called mobile, and we wanted to work from home. And we wanted to collaborate with our data in environments like Google Drive and Dropbox. We wanted to use the public cloud. We want to use software as a service. All these things started increasing our landscape, and coincidentally, our data is going up in terms of the number of breaches. We're also right on the cusp of a new era, IoT. IoT presents a whole new set of challenges with a whole new slew of devices that propose a whole new strategy that we need to develop for that endpoint. Right now, we sit at about 15 billion connected devices worldwide. In 3 years, we'll probably be conservatively around 30 billion devices. That's an enormous amount of new landscape that we need to protect. Oh, well, by the way, hackers are really good at getting in our systems, and they do it with our own credentials 100% of the time. They're actually not cracking systems. They're actually stealing our credentials to get in systems. And here's what's worse. It takes us 143 days to actually know they're there. They're navigating our environments, looking for data, looking for ways to exploit our systems. The reality is half of the companies don't ever find them. They're actually found out by an external party like the FBI knocking on the door and say, hey, by the way, we found your data in the dark web. You might want to take a look and see what's going on with the controls in your organization. So really, what we're talking about here is we're not doing a really good job of preventing breaches. We're not doing a good job of detecting them once they occur. There are continued incentives for bad guys to continue developing more sophisticated attacks to come at us. And the landscape is getting more and more complex to protect. We really need a new strategy, a new approach to address those risks that I talked about earlier. The known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. We need to leverage automation. We need to leverage the power of big data to really combat what we're up against. We need to use automation to identify the risks sooner and the known knowns in our environments, where we have unpatched servers, where we have known risks that need to be closed quickly and expediently. We need to be able to detect and understand when someone infiltrates our environment. We need to do that so that we can get folks who are focused on some of those manual tasks that can be done with automation, focused on really finding those unknown unknowns, those cognitive skills that really we talked about earlier that Nick brought up and says, can't really be replaced by a human, by a machine. The foundation of this has to be using data, though. Data is key. Not just static data, but data in motion so that we can understand what's going on right now, real time, because time is on the sides of the hackers. Now, traditionally, we used to collect data from only a small set of the environments, really from a security perspective that protected our environments. And we used to correlate that data. But that's no longer enough. We need to bring data in from all parts of our ecosystem. And now with our ecosystem expanding into the cloud, we need to bring things like CloudTrail data, threat intelligence data. All that needs to be coagulated into a large central platform like Splunk that has the ability to scale and provide you insight as your economy and needs, as your environment grows, and as the amount of connections that you need to bring in and bring that data in can handle. You need to be able to integrate that system and stitch it together. And this is something that we at Head do, is we stitch together your enterprise service management system to allow you to put alerts that are found within the Splunk environment, as well as grabbing your CMDB data that identifies where in your environment you might have some risks. Now, I want to walk through a little scenario that kind of describes how this all fits together. So we have head aviation, and we have an admin, and she receives an email. And inside that email, there's a PDF. Everyone opens up those PDFs, right? Well, what's really sitting behind that PDF is actually a piece of malware. That malware is going to try to phone home and grab additional malware to run and explore that machine, to grab all the files, Excel documents, PDFs, and neatly zip those things up into an email and attempt to send those back home. Fortunately, we're listening on port 25, and the firewall prevents that from occurring. What happens is we want to know about what's going on in our environment that triggered that defense mechanism. We send that data off to Splunk, where Splunk then takes that data and shoots it off and integrates it into ServiceNow, where it opens up an incident management ticket for further investigation. Now with that, I want to introduce Ryan Hale, who leads our enterprise service management practice, who's going to walk through kind of the life and the day of an analyst that will be the receiving end of this and showing how that data coming together and how we can operate more efficiently by having these two systems, these two class act systems working together. So, Ryan?
Yeah, Ryan. How's it going, everybody? So we only got a couple of slides left, and then you can be done with both myself and Michael. And I'll try to make a security incident response demo as sexy and cool as possible, which is a little challenging. If I have to dance, I'll probably end up doing it. But to kind of play this out in a more detailed fashion, the way this is going to work, or the way that it works within our environment, is we're going to get an alert from Splunk. And via web services, we're going to pull that information in, and we're going to create a security incident. And as part of that, we're going to pull in a couple of key critical pieces of data. We're going to pull in our configuration item, which is our CI. The important piece here is if we know where the breach is occurring, right, we can see upstream and downstream what those relationships are. So something as, I would say, less cool or not as fun as a credit card reader in a store, right? If we can understand what it has access to, what services we have, we can understand the type of response we need to engage in. There we go, the second click worked. It's also going to seed impact and priority data so that we can understand what's our initial response, right? Are our hackles up and we need to ring all the alarm bells, or do we have a little bit of time to do some investigation and diagnosis? And we've got an impact of 2 and a priority of 3, which is going to make life a little bit easier. And then one piece to call out is we've got these knowledge results that are below our title. And what this is going to be able to do, right, leveraging out-of-box capability in ServiceNow, is it's going to pre-populate knowledge articles that should help us in investigation and diagnosis. So to do that investigation and diagnosis, what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of pieces of data that have come in via Splunk, our source IP and our destination IP. And we're going to go in Splunk, and we're just going to really try to understand how serious is this? Is this a single instance on a single user's machine? Or is this a much broader and pervasive issue we need to sort through? So we're going to do a quick search of our source IP address and our destination IP address. That's going to pull back a limited set of data. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to use a wildcard search to really query Splunk and just say, how bad are we, right? Are we in a pretty tough spot? And thankfully, right, since we've had control over the demo, we're taking a bad situation. We're going to go down a little bit of a happy path. And that happy path is it's only occurred on that admin's machine. And at this point, we're going to hop back in, right? If I've got my security analyst hat on, we're going to hop back into ServiceNow. And what we're going to do is we're going to update the record. And we're going to update the priority, because through that investigation and diagnosis, we've determined, guess what? It's just not unauthorized traffic, it's actually malware. So it's something that we need to treat exceptionally seriously. And this is where it gets kind of cool. So there's been a ton of talk today around working smarter, not harder, leveraging automation, using the technology that we have access to stitch together and execute in a measured and systematic fashion. And ServiceNow can do that. So as part of this, right, we're going to execute 3 workflows simultaneously to 3 different groups. Right? We're going to work with our end user computing group. They're going to go retrieve that infected machine so that they can do the appropriate analysis. And they're also going to bring along a replacement. We're going to reach out to the NOC and to our security team so that they can block the IP address on the firewall. And they're also going to update the proxy. And the nice part about doing all this and executing all this through ServiceNow is that we can query, or we can kick off standard change records, so that way if we ever get audited, we're going to have a full chain of custody of what we did, what we changed, and when we changed it, and it's going to make everybody's lives a whole heck of a lot easier, a whole heck of a lot less painful. One of the other really nice things, right, and Michael's kind of mentioned this a couple times, 143 days is a super long time, right? That's longer than a quarter. So for that to be the response time that we have for security breaches in our environment, not necessarily the best thing, right? We want to be able to shorten those response times down. Those containment workflows should help driving this. And another piece that's really going to help us achieve that, which is our dashboard, right? So as ServiceNow is pulling data in from Splunk, pulling data in from a litany of other applications, we can aggregate and correlate that data into real-time dashboards. So that way we can understand how good are we at actually responding to these security incidents, how good are we at actually being able to contain them, and how good are we at actually being able to resolve those. So the data that we have, because Michael and I are super awesome at our job, right? We've got 7 hours and 22 minutes from a containment to resolution, so we're just crushing that 143 days. But what the kind of the moral of the story is, we want to leverage the tools that we have that we can aggregate up. Right, the picture Michael painted before I came on stage is a little bleak and a little scary. I didn't sleep well last night after he told me about how bad things can get. But through the power of data, through the power of the platform technologies that we have, we can centralize on this. Just a quick call to action. If you want to learn more about security incident response or our growing security practice, we're happy to chat over a beer during the happy hour, or you can reach out to Michael or myself or coordinate a briefing with your sales rep. Come down to the Chicago office. We'll all hang out and kind of geek out together. And with that, thanks everybody for your time.